Hello. And do you ever wonder why somebody could be hurt on the side of the road, whatever, and hundreds of cars could pass by, right? And then all of a sudden, one car stops, and then another car, and another car, another car? If you find that interesting, you're going to love this episode on Mr. E's Mysteries. I'm Mr. E, and we're going to be talking about all things mysterious in the world of psychology. So, what we're talking about is something called diffusion of responsibility, also known as bystander effect or bystander apathy. And what it is this tendency where there are a lot of people that are observing someone in crisis, that everybody just kind of ignores it because they just truly believe that somebody else will stop to help out. Yet, if you're the only one there, you're much, much more likely to help out. So there was a field study done at one point in time. A field study is like an experiment that's done in a natural environment. So in this field study, they took a woman and her car, they parked it on the side of a fairly busy highway in not a super big city, but a decent sized city where you have hundreds of cars passing by her per hour. And so this is before the age of cell phones. So her hood is up and she's in the back of the car, leaning up against the car, waiting for somebody to stop. As she's sitting there waiting, hundreds of cars pass by. And this goes on for over 2 hours. Tow trucks have passed by her, community service vehicles have passed by her, and hundreds of other people going about their day have passed by her. After about 2.5 hours, a police officer drives by and finally stops. Okay. And this would be an example of diffusion of responsibility because all of those other cars that were driving by, they were just going about their day. They assumed that somebody else will stop and help. So what they did in this same experience is they took the same woman, the same car, and they parked her on the side of a rural road. Okay. And they put the hood up, and almost before the camera crew could even get set up and leave, the first car that drove by stopped and was ready to help her. And of course, we all know why that car stopped, because the individual said, I don't really know when the next car would be driving by here, so I thought I should help. Now, this is by no means a perfect experiment. In fact, it's not an experiment. It's a field study where there are a lot of variables that go uncontrolled. You know, when you are on a busier road, a lot of the people might have some place to go. They might be going to work, that sort of thing. You might think of somebody out in the country having a greater knowledge of like being able to help with a car because maybe they're handier with tools and that sort of thing. So there are other variables that are involved in this type of field study, but it really goes to show like 2.5 hours compared to minutes that it took for somebody to stop to help this person in distress. That is an example of bystander effect or bystander apathy, diffusion of responsibility. And what triggered me to do this podcast is that I was watching a YouTube short. I went down that rabbit hole, and there was a video of a 10 or 11-year-old girl at the edge of a waterfall, substantially, maybe 15, 20 feet drop. So a substantial drop. And this 10-year-old girl, I would say 10 or 11, was holding on to her probably 5 or 6-year-old brother. And the video emphasized how this girl was helping, trying to save her brother from falling down the waterfall. Of course, me being a little bit different, I was watching the video and I saw her hanging on for what felt like maybe 30 seconds. And there were a decent amount of people that were at this place. It was probably a well-visited tourist attraction. And I watched the background while this girl was hanging on. And I saw one person kind of just slowly, gradually walking towards her. And there was a scene of about 20 or 30 people. And then there was another person walking towards her. And then all of a sudden, you see 30 people charging at this girl trying to, get her brother from the edge of this waterfall. And I thought, wow, this is just an absolute perfect example of how life works. Where initially people are looking around thinking somebody else is going to help. But then as soon as one person made their way towards these two individuals, you saw the throngs of people diving in there um, to help out. And by the end of it, it was almost like too much. There was like 7 or 8 people that were they were almost fighting, trying to save this girl and her little brother or whoever it was, this little boy. And it was just like a perfect scene of what diffusion of responsibility, how it actually works. What I want to end on is I just want to talk very briefly about the most famous example of diffusion of responsibility, and that is called the Kitty Genovese case. And I'll just give you just a little heads up. There is a totally new perspective on the Kitty Genovese case than what initially had transpired. So Kitty Genovese lived in a really busy, bustling New Jersey neighborhood, and she was attacked. And she was attacked outside of her apartment. It was a warm summer night, so everybody's windows were open. So there were hundreds of witnesses that heard her screaming. And the attack ended. The perpetrator left. The perpetrator actually came back and attacked her some more. And supposedly nobody did anything. And this was the first experience of a bystander effect or bystander apathy, what we now know as diffusion of responsibility. And they interviewed all of these individuals in the neighborhood, and they all, many of them said that they thought somebody else was going to call 911. So they initially thought that nobody had done anything. And that's how it was advertised in the newspaper. And it really made people think, wow, nobody really cares about each other. And now they thought, well, instead of yelling rape or help, that you should yell fire, because if you yell fire, then that's going to impact everybody and everybody's going to make a phone call, that sort of thing. But what actually ended up happening is the 911 operators got kind of miscombobulated, and the 911 calls weren't handled appropriately. And it was actually that several people did call 911 to help her, but that did not get recognized. And so bystander apathy, bystander effect, diffusion of responsibility all became a thing, but there were actually people that were helping. So even though diffusion of responsibility is a real phenomenon, the Kitty Genovese case is not exactly a perfect example of this. So that's just something to take into consideration. If you've ever heard that story, or if you've ever seen the movie Boondock Saints, they talk about Kitty Genovese in there. It did not exactly play out as you would see, as it seemed. So it's really quite fascinating how in the world of psychology, my first 10 years, I was talking about Kitty Genovese. And now for the last 15 years, it's like, well, it didn't actually work out that way. So it is really a fascinating world that we live in, where we just continue to learn new things, sometimes by mistake. So I hope you loved this this podcast, Diffusion of Responsibility. I am Mr. E. This is Mr. E's Mysteries. Make sure you follow us on any of the podcast apps, Apple or YouTube or Spotify. Again, I want to thank our director and producer, Bear Wade, with Unify Agency. If you want to become an influencer, a podcaster, etc., make sure you contact him. I hope you all have a great day. Thanks for your time. See ya.